el icono de un mundo. Presionen el icono del mundo, luego va a aparecer la palabra interpretación y escojan el idioma español. Si están utilizando un iPhone, en la parte derecha de la pantalla, en la parte de abajo, va a aparecer la palabra más o 3 puntos. Por favor, presionen esa palabra o los 3 puntos, elijan interpretación de idiomas y luego elijan el canal español. Gracias.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Maria. So I'll give a second for Eric to get that room set up. There we go. And now over to you, Heather.
So I just want to take a moment to say welcome GPAC members and staff and consultant team and members of the community. Really nice to see everybody before we all enjoy the holiday next week. So we have a packed agenda this evening, so I'm not going to bore you with my unnecessary words when we have so much meat that we are going to be talking about today. So but thank you for being here. We appreciate your time and your engagement, and I will hand it over to Dave to do roll call.
Thank you very much, Heather. So yeah, I'm just going to run through the names. If you could all please let us know if you are here. Dave Alden.
Here.
Excellent. Stephanie Blake. There's Stephanie. I see you. Maybe you don't have we see you. Okay, we got Stephanie. We'll get you the co-host access here. Phil, I saw you earlier.
Oh, no, we're unmuted. And Jesse, I'm in her house with her.
That's what I thought, Jesse. Perfect. That threw me off for a second. I'm like, I thought I saw Stephanie, but that's Jesse. That got really confusing. Perfect. Thank you. Aaron, are you with us? I don't think I saw Aaron yet. Delia Diaz. No Delia. Mary Dooley. No Mary. Sierra. I think I saw Sierra.
Yes,
Sierra.
thank you.
Welcome. Jesse, we saw you. Allie Gaylord. No Allie. Yancy. Saw Yancy earlier.
Here.
Welcome, Yancy. Roger. Saw you there as well.
Here.
Excellent. Ileana. Don't think I saw Ileana yet. Roberto.
Here.
Welcome. Chris. I think I saw Chris earlier. She is. Excellent. Might have to just give you co-host access. Bill. I think I saw Bill. Excellent. John. John joined us yet? Nope, not yet. Josh. Saw you earlier. Great. Welcome, Josh. Janice. I know you're here with us as well. Excellent. And Bill.
I'm here.
Excellent. Thank you all again for your commitment and joining us. So as I always do, we'll make this quick and sweet for just in case there's folks joining us that haven't before. Same protocol as far as logistics go. I know you're all experts, but just reminder of different audio options, and we do have closed captioning available. We do ask that you mute yourself if you're not speaking, just so that we don't have anyone accidentally speak over each other. But as GPAC members, you do have co-host access. So when you are ready to speak, use the raise hand. We'll make sure to give you that access. So it would be great for GPAC members to see you all on video since we're not together all that often. Great to see you all. And then, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, as usual, that raise hand. And I know the raise hand has been getting a little bit interesting with Zoom. It might pop up in a different place, but most likely it'll be in your reactions, just in case you don't see it in new reactions. It might actually just be directly in your toolbar. I think they're going through some updates, so it's getting interesting. But let us know, just unmute yourself or wave at us, and we'll go ahead and unmute you. As always, if you have technical difficulties, feel free to reach out to Eric at ericroberts@cityofpetaluma.org. Or for those following along in Spanish, it's Maria at mapigalbez@gmail.com. So with that, as Heather mentioned earlier, we have a jam-packed agenda for you this evening. Lots of great updates that you'll get to hear about here shortly on a lot of great projects that the city's been working on. We definitely want to get you up to speed with what we've heard thus far from the community, specifically related to the guiding principles and areas of discussion. And with that, we're going to actually launch into small group exercise with you all to kind of reconfirm and make sure that we have all our ducks in a row before that process gets moved forward. And then we'll talk a little about next steps as we typically do. And at the beginning and at the end, as we typically do, we'll also have public comment, which is coming up here shortly. And then we'll get some final thoughts and hopefully wrap up close to 9. So with that, if there are any members of the public that would like to provide comment now, we'll ask you to use the raise hand feature to do that. And then Eric will be able to unmute you and give you 2 minutes to contribute. So is there anyone that would like to provide any comment early on? And just a reminder, there will be an opportunity at the end of the meeting as well. I don't see any hand raised. Eric, am I missing anything?
I'm also not seeing any hands raised in our attendees tonight.
Okay. So with that, we are going to go ahead and get started right into the presentation, and I'm going to hand it over to Ron.
Great, thank you, Dave. Thank you, Heather, Eric, staff. Welcome, GPAC members and members of the public. Good to see you all again. Before jumping into the really substantive items tonight, we, as has been our practice, wanted to bring you up to speed on a few project activities as well as some related community and city initiatives. So we want to do this relatively quickly so that we preserve plenty of time for the discussion, which really is the purpose of tonight's meeting. But very briefly, next slide, please, Dave. Did want to give you a status update on the existing conditions work. I am pleased to say that all but one at this point has been completed and is posted on the project website, and we anticipate that final existing conditions report focused on infrastructure and utilities by the end of the month. So stay tuned, and as David has been doing, he will be sure to let you know as soon as that final report is available for your review. And as a reminder, we share them obviously with the public for general interest, but for you, it's particularly important that you take some time to review these. These are foundational documents, which will be kind of the platform for a lot of the work that follows. And so please do take the time, right after Thanksgiving dinner, perhaps while you're really fresh and awake, to really dive into these and get yourself familiar with some of the basic conditions in it. And now pass it off to Heather, who's got a few updates, and then we've got some other visiting city staff here tonight.
Great, thanks, Ron. So as we have previously mentioned, we have been going around to all of the committees and commissions to give them an overview of the existing condition report, as well as a general overview of where we are in the general plan process. Some of the committees had a specific report that was really relevant to their purview, which we focused on, but a lot of the committees and commissions, we gave more of an overview of all of the reports. So this morning I met with the senior advisory committee, and that really rounded it out. So we have gone around to all of the committees and commissions, which it was great to talk to each body and get their feedback and their questions and their thoughts about what surprised them about the existing conditions report, or what they really feel like is important for us to be focusing on as we move to the next phases based on that foundation. So I want to emphasize that we've gathered all this information. We've got comments on the existing condition report. We've got feedback from GPAC. We've got feedback from all these boards and commissions, and we have public feedback on the existing conditions report. So we really are now taking all that feedback and looking at it and working with staff and the consultants and the sub-consultants to really think about what we need, how to respond to it, and a thoughtful way to respond to the comments, and what came up as a comment that really we need to hold on to until we start getting into the next phases, and what warrants a change actually to the existing condition report. So bear with us, but we are doing that process now. there has been some emerging issues that have come up that we've heard from multiple people or multiple of the committees, looking at revising some language in the transportation existing condition report, review the maps on flooding and sea level rise, a number of comments on trees and how to really consider trees throughout these documents, additional information on parks and open space. So we're diving deep into that to make those changes or respond in the existing conditions to address those. So we are targeting the city council on the 20th of December to bring that and give them all the feedback we've heard, kind of where we've been, and present that comprehensive existing condition report to them. So next slide. So I also wanted to touch on a little bit of some of the kind of real specific engagement that we've been focused on after some of our larger community scale engagement. And this was in response to what are some of the groups in the community that we haven't seen enough representation at the quadrant meetings, at the pop-ups, at the visioning workshops. So the two that we've really been focused on most recently have been the Latinx community and the youth engagement. So Latinx, we are working towards holding 2 focus groups in either the last week of November and early December to really get into those discussions of the visioning and the areas of discussion and issues and opportunities across the city. And we're building on past efforts in the relationship with the Latinx focus group on community outreach. And those focus groups will be facilitated by Martine and David. So making some progress there and looking forward to having those events and getting that feedback. Similarly with youth engagement, and this really GPAC member Shribs really brought this one up and made some connections between staff and members on our youth commission. So there were a few GPAC members who really volunteered, stepped up to participate in that. We have met with Petaluma High School and are working on 2 upcoming strategies to get more youth engagement, one being a survey that will go out in November and December, and then the other is to have a general plan week at the high school in early January, which will be a number of different activities, a pop-up, live presentations in classrooms, educational forums for youth. So that's another strategy that we're working on to really engage the youth population. Next slide, please. So there was a pretty exciting thing that happened in the community recently, and that is the Cool City Challenge. So in October, Petaluma was awarded a $1 million grant to fund a community-based effort that focuses on building up our social networks to help neighborhoods become more planet-friendly, disaster resilient, and community rich. So there were 3 cities that were awarded this grant. It was Petaluma, Irvine, and LA. So it's really exciting. And it will be looking at a bold bottom up and top down approach by having community members, businesses, nonprofits, and government all working together. So the proposal was a moonshot team that put together a strategy framework portion of the application, and it really built on the city's climate emergency framework. And there were 25 community partners in that effort, and they were able to recruit 300 cool block leaders. So it's really getting into it at the super local neighborhood level. So what Petaluma is going to be working on, as well as Irvine and LA, as the 3 pilot cities in 2022, and it's really going to be creating a template for other cities in 2023. So it's very exciting. It's happening very quickly, and it's kind of forming right now. So in the next 2 months, the group will be creating the infrastructure for what will be called Cool Petaluma, and they'll officially launch that program in January. And so more to come on that in terms of what next steps will be. I did talk with Natasha Juliana today, and she wasn't available to be here tonight, but she will come and provide a little presentation at our next GPAC meeting in more detail. And Patrick Carter has been the primary staff liaison to this effort, and unfortunately he was not able to be here as well tonight. So I guess my input is a little teaser, and then we will try to give you more information as it becomes available on this effort. But we're really excited. Lots of great ideas and hard work, and $1 million prize. So it's very exciting. Next slide, please. So we had a request from the GPAC to provide an update on the recent storm impact. So I'm going to hand it over to Gina Benedetti-Petnick and Christopher Bolt from our Public Works and Utility team. They're going to provide like we said, we have a packed agenda. So provide a brief update on what happened with the recent storm. And then for more information, I would point GPAC members both to Christopher gave a very detailed presentation to City Council on Monday night, and that presentation is available on Granicus. And then we have a PowerPoint deck that we will send out to all the GPAC and post on the Plan Petaluma website as well, with some information in more detail. So Gina or Christopher, I'm not sure which one of you is just going to share some of the takeaways.
Thanks, Heather. I'll kick this off and then let Christopher wrap up with any additional comments and keep it very brief. This is, you're seeing photographs from the October 24th storm. And that was a very severe weather event, and one that Petaluma hasn't seen the likes of in my memory. We have, with the help of Sonoma Water, have learned that this was the equivalent of a 100-year probability storm event within Petaluma. Our watershed received less water, and that anomaly, the watershed closer to probably 10 to max a 30-year storm characterization, that anomaly showed us that we can't rely on our stream gauges like we have in the past. Our stream gauges were faring fairly well, and we did not overtop the banks of any of the creeks or the river, but we did have localized flooding, some of it severe. And we also had some what we call SSOs, sanitary sewer overflows, where manholes will lift up and we'll have a spill from a sewer line. And so we did have a few of those on the west side. And I think that the worst of the storm, of course, hit as always at high tide. So we had a high tide, a pretty good high tide, close to 4 o'clock that afternoon. And it wasn't until after the high tide started waning that the waters were able to finally start leaving town. So the next slide, Heather, I think is a map. Is that right? Yeah. So this is a map. It doesn't really give great characterization, but it does give you an idea of where we had very localized flooding. So we had power outages during the middle of the night that we were dealing with. We had hundreds of calls to police and to fire, emergency calls, and to Public Works for various items. most commonly, these flooded areas that you see are the yellow diamonds on this map. And for the most part, other than the East Court area and Lakeville, most of these areas were very isolated, and it was largely due to blockages in culverts or blockages from leaves on drain grates, at curb and gutter. So we did see a lot of that. And the red triangles that you see are where we had our sanitary sewer overflows. There was one up on D Street, close to Brown Court. And then Post and B is the next one up from the bottom. And then you see three that from this view look like they're along the river. They're actually along Petaluma Boulevard south. And then one over on Weller Street, just to the northeast of the turning basin. That's the highest one on this map. And that's a brief characterization. It was fast and furious, and it kept Public Works and our emergency personnel hopping for many, many hours. And we have, again, a more detailed presentation, and I do, like Heather, encourage you to watch Christopher's presentation to City Council from Monday the 15th, which is full of detail, and I think will answer a lot of questions. And that said, Christopher, I think you're on, and I'd love it if you love to introduce Christopher Bolt, our new Director of Public Works, to this group. I think many of you have not had a chance to meet him yet, and I'm delighted to have him here. Christopher, if there's anything that you want to chime in here, love to hear from you.
Thank you, Gina. That was a great overview. And as Gina mentioned, the presentation we gave Monday night to City Council was about 10, maybe 15 minutes total. And we tried to give an overview of the overall event with also a timeline. I just want to say and speak to the seriousness of this event. It set many records throughout the region. And a recent update to the Regional Water Board, the regulatory agency who oversees sanitary sewer treatments and so forth, revealed that there were 50-some sanitary sewer overflows throughout this area. And in fact, well over 1 million gallons of sewage was basically overflowed into the Bay Area. So it was a very serious event, and I'm real happy to share that here in Petaluma, our Ellis Creek water recycling facility did not have any of that. So we were able to store all the extra flows that came into the plant and treat it. So there are many good news stories. I was out and about with the crews on Sunday the 24th, evaluating things as it happened, and just real proud of all that our team has done. Unfortunately, some residents are impacted, and that is something we take very seriously, and we have been looking long and hard internally to avoid those impacts in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you to both of you. I will send the link both to the PowerPoint from Monday night's council meeting, as well as the PowerPoint for GPAC, so that GPAC members can look at those in more detail. And I guess, Dave, I think we were going to turn it now to, are there any questions that GPAC has before we move into, the next part of our agenda?
That's right. Yeah, thank you, Heather. Thank you all for those great updates. So we just wanted to give you an opportunity here, if you had any clarifying questions based on the updates that you just heard, give you a chance to raise those now before we get another short presentation and then launch into our small groups. So thank you all for remembering how this works. And Janice, I see your hand raised first, so please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Quickly, when I was looking at the map where you had the yellow, where the flooding was, there were actually other areas. And I have photos of those, and I will send them to you.
Great. Thank you, Janice. John, I see you're up next. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to add that maybe we need to start thinking that instead of this being a 100-year event, 1 in 100 years, that remember everyone's telling us this is not going to be 1 in 100 years. This is more like 1 in 5 years that we're going to be seeing down the road here, and we really need to be prepared for this to being 1 in 5 years. Same with the drought. The drought of 2 years that we just had is just an inkling of the 5 and 7 year drought that we're going to be seeing down. And maybe we really need to plan for this to be more consistent drought periods and heavy rainstorms coming in, and not think of this as, oh, this is just a one-off 100-year thing, but actually plan for this to be a regular thing down the road here. That's, I just want to support that and get us all ready to do that.
Great, thanks for bringing that up, John. Appreciate it. Bill, I think I saw you trying to do the raise hand. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. Thanks.
Sure.
Having my mistake.
No problem.
Question that about the existing conditions reports that have come out. I'm wondering if you're going to do another staff summary of the other reports for us to review.
Heather or Ron?
Yeah, well,
I was thinking Ron.
yeah, Bill, I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to. So we sent you. You've got a summary document that kind of shares all the key findings from all the existing reports, and then you've got the individual deep dive reports. Were you referring to something else, or?
Well, maybe I haven't just seen it yet, but at our last meeting, we had a summary of the reports that had been released to date. And since then, several others have come online, and I didn't know if you'd updated the summary to include those.
If memory serves, the summary we shared was comprehensive. It included key findings from reports that hadn't yet been finalized, but had been in draft form. And so if there are any substantive changes in the reports that are now inconsistent with that summary, we'll be sure to update the summary.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Good question. Roger, thanks for your patience.
Oh yeah, I'll just be very quick. On my water nerd side needs to point out that this was a 100-year or so rainfall event, but that doesn't translate to runoff event. So we have to, I think, separate when we report out numbers. We want to definitely separate rainfall from runoff. And also this storm, because I looked at it pretty carefully myself, it was a very wet, had a lot of water, but it was not that intense. So we also want to report out not just its recurrence interval of 50, 100 years, but for what interval of time we're looking at. 15-minute, this is in a 12-hour, this is a very, very wet, a real river, an atmospheric river event. So kind of a small thing, but I just want to, there's a little more information that goes into when we talk about rainfall and runoff.
Great point. Thank you, Roger. Okay, I don't see any other hands unless the team had anything else to wrap that item up. I'm going to go ahead and share screen again here and hand it over to Ron so that he can get us a quick update before we roll into the small groups.
Great, thank you, Dave. So yeah, I wanted to just briefly put into context and share a bit more background information about the summary of community input that we sent you in advance of the meeting. And we really hope you took the time to review, because it is really the starting point for the discussion that we'd like to have with you in small groups tonight. Really getting us to the point where we've got your feedback on how the community input we received to date related to guiding principles, pillars, and areas of discussion, how that should inform preparations of the final drafts of each of those work products, which are really important work products. One that brings to closure the visioning phase of the process, and the other which lays the foundation for the alternatives phase of the process. So I'm going to just share a little information to put that all into context as a platform for launching into those small group discussions. So some of this is a repeat, but it's important contextual information. And this is a multi-phase project over many years. We just discussed the outputs of the discovery phase, the existing conditions reports, and tonight we're largely focusing on input we've received from the public or that informs the product of the visioning phase, which is the vision and guiding principles, and also portions of the alternatives phase, the vision diagram. Next slide. So again, we've been even though the planning process is somewhat incremental and sequential, we are moving and have been moving on multiple phases concurrently. Hence the need tonight to get your input on work products that relate to 2 different phases, both visioning and alternative. So again, this is a refresher. The purpose of the vision and guiding principles is to develop a foundational guidance for the general plan. Together, these describe the conditions that community members want to see in several decades out and outline the direction that the city needs to follow to achieve that vision. These inform next steps in the planning process and ultimately frame the plan itself, much in the same way the guiding principles in the current general plan. And so we've been on this path, largely driven by community input, to get to a draft of the vision guiding principles that will go first to you in proposed final form for final review and feedback, and then on to City Council. So this all started with input from the surveys the city did in 2020, and then we incorporated input from listening sessions with you and City Council members, as well as from input at other GPAC meetings early in the process. We then invited input that informed the guiding principles at area meetings and pop-ups in the workshop. And now we're at the point of summarizing for you some of that critical input to get your input guidance at this point on how we should adjust the guiding principles, if at all, at this point, before we bring the next to final version back to you. So 2 things specifically that inform the guiding principles are, 1, the priorities that were voted on by people at the recent pop-up meetings. And the other is the feedback we got from people at the workshop. Next slide, please, Dave. Where we invited community members, both during the workshop and for 2 to 3 weeks afterwards, to make specific comments on the draft pillars of Petaluma or values and the draft guiding principles, which you had previously seen several times, starting with a review of the guiding principles in the existing general plan, and then a review of a revised draft. So we're asking you to look at it one more time tonight, next to the input from the workshop, to give us your final recommendations on how they should be further revised. So that's part 1 of our discussion. Part 2 of our discussion is going to be focused on the areas of discussion that we've also been considering over the course of several meetings. The alternatives phase, and by extension, the housing element, will identify areas where we expect land use changes, as well as areas that we anticipate remaining relatively stable over the course of the planning period. And it helps us to prepare the analysis necessary to help the community understand and evaluate different options or scenarios that we'll consider during the alternatives phase. And so you've seen this map before. It's gone through various iterations, and this is what we had people evaluate through a polling process at the workshop and afterwards. Again, this has gone through a step-by-step process. We're just completing that 3rd square in the process in preparation for preparing a vision diagram that clearly distinguishes areas of change in the city where we anticipate land use changes from areas of stability where we don't anticipate significant land use changes, but will otherwise be the focus of other types of improvements and enhancements. So recent community input from specifically the pop-ups and the workshops informs the development of that vision diagram. So first of all, at the just a little background at the area meetings, among other things, we asked people where they anticipate seeing land use changes in their neighborhoods and what should remain the same. That input informed our identification of potential areas of discussion, which you helped us evaluate and finalize in preparation for the workshop. And then at the workshop itself, thank you, Dave, we invited people to let us know what level of change was appropriate for each of those lettered areas on the map, as well as the 4 potential urban growth boundary areas that were identified back in 2011 by council, and then were the foundation for portions of the 5th cycle housing element. And on this map, you see, and this was in the packet as well, is it's somewhat of a heat map showing on a scale of 0 to 5 how much change people on and the median level of change people thought would be appropriate, as well as the median level of change for each of the 4 UGB areas. Next slide also, Dave, thanks. You also have charts showing both the median and average or mean levels of input, which we want to use as a foundation for tonight's discussion, asking you really for each of these areas of discussion, which should stay in consideration and which, if any, should we take off the table for consideration. So again, all of this information is in that summary of recent community input that was sent to you in advance. We're actually going to use much of that as the foundation for our upcoming small group discussion. So we look forward to talking with you in more detail about what type of input people shared and how we should then use it moving forward to finalize these work plans.
Great. Thank you, Ron. So most importantly, we've now reached the part of the evening where we'd love to hear from you all. And Ron just did a great job of outlining exactly what we're going to be doing. So our hope is the next 45 minutes, we're going to break up into 2 groups, and Eric will get that set up and get us situated. And then we'll dive right into the pillars and guiding principles. And as Ron mentioned, we hope that you have had an opportunity before the meeting to review those and give us any substantive feedback based on what you saw that was collected from the community at those different events. And then we'll spend the last 10 minutes, assuming it's going to be a little bit more straightforward, going through the areas of discussion, just to confirm that, again, what we have on the map is accurate, or if there's anything that we should consider particularly removing from the map as a potential area of discussion. And then, as we always do, we'll do a quick report out at the end just to make sure that we've all kind of heard from each other, and then we'll get to next steps and send you on your way. So with that, Eric, did I give you enough time to set up the groups?
Yep, ready when you guys are.
Okay, one thing actually I will note is for anyone that's with us that's on the Spanish channel and is listening to us through Maria, if you can use the hand raise feature to let us know that you would like to stay with Maria and have her interpretation available, that would be great, because we'll make sure that you stay in this main room. Otherwise, if you do go outside of this room, all you have to do is leave that room and you'll come right back to this main room and be able to follow along with Maria. I don't see any raised hands.
Hey, one quick note, it looks like you're going to have to put Stephanie and
in the same room. Yeah.
Yeah.
We figured that. Yeah, we did a shuffle. I've been in touch with Eric to do a quick shuffle because we also don't have all the GPAC members that we were anticipating. It would be kind of awkward if they got put in different rooms. That'd be interesting. Okay, so Eric, I'll let you go ahead and open up the rooms and we'll get started. Okay. Hi all. Looks like you all got stuck with me. So as Ron mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen again. So what we're going to do, we have a shared document here that I'm hoping you all can see right now, that Michelle from the team is going to help take notes on as we go through this process. And we'll hope to make this as fun and interactive as possible. Just a reminder though, this is for the GPAC to give input on. So members of the public, if you're there along with us, thank you for your patience. We'll have time for public comment afterwards as well. But there's so few of us GPAC members that honestly just feel free to unmute yourself now and contribute whenever you'd like. We can make this just an informal, free-flowing conversation. But let's get started now with the guiding principles. As Ron mentioned, the basis, we just want to kind of give you kind of some foundational elements on what we've heard thus far from the rest of the community. And through the pop-ups and various events, you'll see here on the screen, I hope you all could read this okay, but this is in order of what folks kind of prioritize the top topics, from carbon neutrality to the Petaluma River and natural areas, to historic preservation, sustainability. you're probably seeing a theme there, on through to active transportation infrastructure, all the way down to economic development, which surprisingly is the last of the topics, not to say it's not equally as important. So we just want to give you that quick background on what we've heard from the community. We can come back to this if it would be helpful for you all, if you had any questions on that as well. But I just wanted to go ahead and launch right in. So as Ron mentioned, you've seen iterations of these, and the hope here is that we have these draft pillars and principles now defined, and we wanted to ask you to help us make sure that this is accurate based on the input that we received from the public, providing us with that lens, so it's not us necessarily interpreting what we're hearing from the rest of the public. So if you all are cool with it, I'm just going to go ahead and read the draft pillar, and then again ask you all if you have any additional input, anything that you'd like to change based on the comments again from the community, and we'll go down the list as efficiently as possible. Sound good?
Dave, can I just clarify here? So
Sure.
I think what we're saying, or what you're saying, is that this is the draft pillar that we worked on with GPAC. Then we went into the visioning with those draft pillars, and then the workshop comments are based on that. And now we're trying to check
Refine
back
it.
in with that and say, do we need to shift it at all? Correct?
Great point. Yeah, I might have missed a step and said that we refined them. We haven't refined them based on what you saw previously. This is our opportunity to work with you to make what essentially is the final edit, if any, before this moves forward and gets finalized and taken to City Council. Thanks for that clarification, Heather. So with that, I'm going to start with community character, and I'll just read it again, and you all let me know if there's anything that you'd like to add. But Petaluma is a unique community. It is distinguished by the history as a river town, geographic location, natural environment, legacy of growth management, and forward-thinking population. The general plan must preserve Petaluma's distinctive character. Based on, I'm not going to read every single workshop comment, hoping that you all had an opportunity to do so. Heather, I see you squinting. Should I zoom in? Is it hard to read?
No, that's my thinking face.
Okay.
Doesn't mean I can't see it. I was looking at the comment about dog poo.
Dog poo, yeah, that
Yeah.
one stood out to me as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, dog poo dumping along the river needs attention. That's a big one. So members of GPAC, any thoughts on this particular draft pillar? Any changes you think should be made based on what you've read from members of the community?
Yes, the first comment at the very top, and small town feel.
Mhm.
And also want to add, its agricultural heritage is not mentioned, so I don't see an agricultural heritage history in here. And I don't see the small town, and I've had several, I've seen several comments in these, in other places that we need to preserve that heritage. And so it's primarily, but more important than the river town is even the agricultural history and current agricultural community that is supported around our town. So that needs to be part of our community character. And especially that we have this historic downtown, which is mostly agricultural supporting businesses throughout the downtown area that for all frontage that was developed through our eggs and butter and hay that we were providing for San Francisco. So that's sort of like that feel, that attitude of that history does not feel like it's in this statement. And I'd like to make sure it gets in there somewhere somehow.
Appreciate that, John. Thank you. And in particular, you also wanted to add this small town feel in addition to the agricultural
Or
piece.
words that sort of imply that. I'm not sure how to
Okay.
phrase that. Not
Okay.
say that we have a small town here, but
Got it.
but the way it needs to be written, it needs to include that that we have that.
Got it.
When people walk downtown, it feels like they've transported in time a little bit to our historic buildings and the character of the storefronts, our antique shops, and the like, and that it feels old downtown. Doesn't feel like this big modern LA metropolis. And that small town, we're still an agricultural community, close knit concept, helping each other out. We're still rural basis type of attitude. We're still countryish a little bit. We still have Butter and Eggs Day Parade. So that is not the feel I'm seeing in this statement that you have here now.
Got it. Thanks for that, John. Great input. Anyone else have any thoughts on this one in particular? Not seeing any. And obviously, if you have a great thought that pops in your mind that you aren't able to share here today, you could definitely send that to us as well.
All right, Yancy here.
Oh, Yancy, yes.
One thing that I've noticed is Petaluma is a pioneer in a lot of different spaces.
Mhm.
And I think that's also embedded in our character, or at least as we've developed. And then just going off of the first list that you showed on the first page about what is important to people, and a lot of it is centered around carbon neutrality, the environment. And I do see natural environment and community character, but it kind of feels like as a community we're asking for more.
That's a great point. Yeah, and I think some of those thoughts might come up in a couple other of the pillars, but that's a great point because this is kind of more overarching to consider that here. Thank you for that, Yancy.
Yeah, another thing to add to what was just said is we have community engagement. We have a very high volume of folks that are, as you see here, just with us here and in other areas, high volunteerism, high community stretches that are being made to work. So community, so engaged community needs to be sort of like a term there, I think, that needs to be included, and it's not just forward-thinking population. We had the whole technology industry come and go. We've seen other things come and go. And we are forward-thinking and progressive. I'm not sure if you want to say the word progressive in there. Forward-thinking may be better than progressive. But having that image, that community engaged, a community that is engaged in our activities is an important feature.
Great point. Thank you, John. Excellent. Thanks for taking that down, Michelle. Yes, Roberto.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I think Yancy and John kind of touched on sort of what I was going to say, because the last sentence, the general plan must preserve Petaluma's distinctive character. In a way, it's kind of like I feel conflicted because we want to preserve it, but at the same time, we're also he mentioned the word pioneer, right? But we're open to change, and we're aware of where the future is headed, right? With more electrical energy vehicles and stuff like that. So we have a good balance in preserving our character, but not letting that inhibit our change, right? And adaptability. So and a good example is one that was just provided a couple charts ago, where we're one of 3 places that has been awarded a grant to be kind of like a pilot city, right? So I think we need to emphasize that as part of our character, right? We're in a way paving a way and innovating. So
great point. Thank you, Roberto. I like the adaptability. Like that's key, being able to adapt with the times. Thank you for taking that down, Michelle. Perfect. Thank you, Roberto. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move us to the next pillar, which is equity and justice. I'll read it real quick. Petaluma is committed to advancing social and economic justice to create an inclusive and equitable city for all. The general plan should prioritize supporting those who have been most affected by injustice and facilitate future discussion making that avoids inequities and rectifies past harms. It's pretty deep. But we got some great input from you all, I think, initially when we were discussing that topic. And then, as you can see here, it was a point of conversation as well with folks in the community. But we wanted to make sure that this kind of captures, based on what we're hearing from the community as well, everything that should be part of this pillar. Any thoughts? John, I see you unmuted.
Of course, I did the statement right there that the Kaiser's tagline. If we could add at the end there, because part of this injustice and things is like, okay, we're dealing with this, but the opportunity to thrive, I think, is a wonderful statement, and that we want to provide an opportunity for everyone to thrive. I'd like to steal that also. That sounds like a wonderful tagline that we should emphasize toward, that all should thrive. It's a very positive and forward thinking rather than we're just going to make these changes because we have to because of the current legal things that are going on.
Right. Great point, John. Any other thoughts on this one in particular?
I like that. One of the comments included the word anti-racist. And then in the equity and justice pillar as it stands, that piece at the very end that says that avoids inequities, that word avoids inequities, avoids doesn't sit well.
Any thoughts on maybe how that could be revised, that word? You can give us some thought and let us know, but that's a great point. That's a great point. Okay. Any other thoughts on this particular pillar? Thank you both for that. Yes, Sierra.
Yeah, just totally uplifting what Yancy said. And also I really liked in this last comment, the impact of action. They don't just mention like anti-racist language, but they're also talking about the actions that back it up. And I love that idea. So thinking more about how we can put more like of that action into this goal as well.
Great. Thank you for that, Sierra. Excellent. Okay. Excellent. And thank you all for being so thoughtful and kind of really looking at what the community is providing as well and helping us kind of integrate some of those thoughts. That's very helpful.
Dave,
Heather,
can I ask
sure.
question? I'm wondering if that that area that says avoids inequalities, would it make sense to flip it to positive, you know, instead of avoiding it, to facilitate equality and rectify past harms or something to kind of make it a more active instead of avoiding, but actually doing it?
I'm seeing nodding. Yeah, and see, does that sound good to you?
Yeah, that sounds better. Thank you, Heather.
Great.
Wait, Heather, could you repeat that? It sounded good, but I didn't get a chance to write it down.
I was just saying, instead of avoiding inequality, saying something like, you know, decision making that facilitates equality instead of avoiding inequality. Just trying to make it like more active and present. Because I hadn't thought about it, but I really, what Yancy said resonated.
Oh, just want to flag that equality and equity are two different things. So I would advocate for equity in there, but I mean, we can think about that as well.
Yeah, and that might, instead of inequality, inequities, having it be equity.
Facilitate equity.
Yeah, I got it.
That's a great catch.
Yeah, great point.
Great catch. Okay, let me highlight this so I remember to catch that. Excellent. Thanks for that, Heather. So
might as well change the verb on the rectify to rectify. And rectify past harms.
Rectify.
If you're going to do grammar consistency.
If I knew how to spell rectify, am I doing something wrong? We'll catch that. We'll get that figured out. Great point, John. Thank you. Okay, so next is climate action, resilience, and sustainability. Obviously, you heard a lot from folks in the community that these were some of the most important topics for them. So I'll read this, and you can see there's a host of comments here from folks as well. But Petaluma is committed to bold action to achieve carbon neutrality and to building resilience to climate change impacts, including sea level rise, increasing temperatures, drought, and wildfire intensity. The general plan should advance new ways of thinking, changes in our relationship with the natural environment, and planning for current impacts and those in the distant future. Mouthful. Any thoughts on this based on what you had a chance to review from the public? And I see a hand raised from Sonoma County Conservation. Unless I'm mistaken, I believe you might be a member of the public. This is really just meant for GPAC discussion at this point, but we will have an opportunity for the members of the public to contribute as well shortly. So thank you so much for your patience, but we'll come back to public comment after this small group exercise. So thanks again. All right, team, any thoughts on this particular pillar?
Okay, I'll go ahead and make a small addition.
Sure.
The word nature-based solutions
Mhm.
should be a part of this, which is very strongly, so we're not going after high technology, but nature-based solutions will be emphasized in our approach.
Good point, John. Thank you. Looks like Sierra agrees with that. Thank you, Sierra. Any other thoughts on this one? Does it capture? Yes, Yancy.
Sorry, that first bullet point is really resonating with me. I would love
Measurable.
to see, action to achieve carbon neutrality by like 2030. I think having a goal in mind and actions to lead up to that goal would be great.
Excellent. Thank you for that addition. John agrees. All right. So unless there's any other thoughts here, and this is one I think we spent a good amount of time on together. Yeah, John, did you have another thought? Oh no, I think you might be muted, John. Was that by accident?
Yeah, I was trying to get rid of the icon.
Okay, I know there's too many reactions to mess with Zoom these days. Okay, great. Thank you for that again, everyone. So the next is about participatory decision-making and transparency of government. So this reads, the community works and evolves best when all voices are engaged and participate in the decision-making process. The general plan should reflect the perspectives of Petaluma's diverse population, ensure that opportunities to engage in public dialogue are accessible to all residents, and set the stage for solving future challenges with integrity, creativity, and collaboration. And John, this goes back to your point earlier about community character in general and how engaged this community is, but really kind of drives that point home in this one particular pillar. Any thoughts or comments on this one? Pretty straightforward, and I'm sure you can see the comments from the general public. Again, someone mentioned here ways to include a metrics of the success of the participatory process. Throwing that out there. Something that we typically do as part of our engagement process is analytics to ensure that we're doing a good job. Any other thoughts or comments on this one? Jesse and Stephanie, you've been awfully quiet. Any thoughts?
You were reading my mind.
Yeah, is that what you want to include as well?
I was just thinking that there's been a lot of discussion, at least in my work, about an erosion of trust in government.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a way for us to have like periodic updates on how we're doing, how we're measuring up against the goals that we've set out to show the action over time, then perhaps we can start to rebuild that trust with some community members. I think it's rampant across the United States. It's not necessarily a Petaluma problem, but anyway, I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on that.
Thanks for that, Jesse. Yeah, John.
I would agree with that. And this outreach that we're doing now and trying to outreach to the various communities needs to be more of a continuous effort. And I think there should be a system set up so that there's actually a process and system for a continuous feedback loop with the disadvantaged communities. And if that's an established way of, so that they know and make it easy for folks to contribute and to stay in place. So it's not always, okay, well, I've got 100 things that are being thrown at me all at once. I've got to act on it. But there's actually a process and a system that's established that people know to go through and is listened to. And that would, by systemizing it, would work a lot more smoothly, because right now it's hard to figure out, well, how can I say anything? It's not going to have any impact if I just say it here, because it's not going to count if I say it here or there, and I'm being asked all over the place and I give up. So we want to avoid that frustration with our system by making a more standardized procedure of this reach out.
That sounds great, John. Yeah, to avoid engagement fatigue. of people not, just kind of being overly engaged at times as well. I think that's a really good point. And you mentioned particularly to disadvantaged members of the community. Is that?
So there's specifically for, let's say, like in town here, we need to have a more of a systematic way of having a feedback loop back and forth. And instead of having it, well, maybe here, maybe there, and how to do it, when to do it, who's going to do it. And it's way too confusing to everyone about how to approach the city to make an actual impact and actually make a statement that's in a proper channel that's being listened to. So we need to have a formalized system of feedback loop with all the disadvantaged communities. That would include the homeless, the Hispanic, and any other communities out there that feel they need to participate.
Got it. Thank you, John. Thanks for that. Any other thoughts on this one before I move forward?
Oops.
Okay. Yes, Janice.
Just a quick question. When you were talking about equity and justice, and now we're the participation, it's hard to participate in this town in politics because our city council is not paid. And so how do you have equity and justice when you have a city council that gets $5 a meeting and the mayor gets $10, a maximum of 4 a month? And it just seems like, how do you get equity when somebody can't, you either have to be retired or a lawyer to be on the city council. So it ties in somewhere, and I'm not sure where it ties in, but that has to do with not just transparency, but also equity and justice.
Thanks for that, Janice. We'll make that note. Okay. I think that's a great point. It could fit here or on the other section, Janice. I think that's a great point, though. We'll take a look at that and see how we can address that in one of these pillars. So I'm going to go ahead and move us forward. Oops, sorry, I just realized there's a few more comments down here that I'm hoping you all have in front of you anyways, from the homework that you received. But we're now diving into, so those are the overarching, it looks like, Eric, are you with me? It looks like Gustavo is trying to, sorry, our interpreters, it looks like they might be switching roles. We got that figured out. Okay. So we had the overarching pillars, right? And now we're diving into more of the guiding principles that basically support those pillars. And again, these are based on the guiding principles that you've seen previously and the supporting concepts, but now we're asking to consider the workshop comments and others that we receive from the community and how or if we need to change any of these principles. Gustavo, I see your hand raised again. Eric, I hope you're here with me and can help. Let's see. Gustavo, did you need help getting into the Spanish channel?
Yes, that's what I need help with. I'm as a participant, not as an interpreter.
Okay. I'm hoping Eric is still in this room with us and can get you moved over here shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. Sorry, team. Thank you for your patience. Just want to see if there's any way I can help make this happen. And I can't. Okay. Gustavo, Eric will hopefully be. Actually, Heather, would you mind texting Eric?
I'll text Eric.
Great. I think actually I don't see him at all. So he might have actually accidentally logged off. Okay, team. Sorry for that interruption. So now we're talking about creating a welcoming, affordable, accessible, and age and family-friendly city. So this is a little bit more direct as to how we're going to achieve some of those overarching pillars and the supporting concepts, as you can see here, being welcoming to everyone, regardless of age, race, ethnicity, gender, ability, sexual orientation, or socioeconomic status, on down the list. And these are some of the supporting concepts that we gathered from you all and others. And then considering these workshop comments again, is there anything in this particular guiding principle that you would like to see changed or updated in any way? Pretty straightforward. Okay. All right, I'm seeing a lot of nods. So we'll assume that that one is pretty well captured what we're hoping to capture. And again, we could always come back if you get something comes up in your mind that you'd like to go back and revisit one of these. The next is honor, celebrate, and preserve Petaluma's heritage and historic character and its place in the modern city. And this kind of reaches back to what we talked about and what you brought up earlier, John, the historic character of the city, the agricultural heritage, obviously the Petaluma River being a major feature that's come up frequently. This is meant to capture most, if not all of that. So any thoughts on this one?
Just from a science guy who's also an educator for geology, just looking at the Miwok people, the very first statement, who were the original stewards. I wouldn't say anybody is the original. I would say historic stewards. I think the dinosaurs were probably the more original stewards who were taking care of this land way before us, like millions of years ago. So I would say use historic stewards of the land rather than original.
Good catch. Thank you, John. Anything else to add here on this particular principle? Pretty straightforward. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and move us on. The next is to preserve and enhance Petaluma's distinct urban edge, surrounding open spaces and natural environment. And again, some of the supporting concepts here are preserving Petaluma's identity, image, and sense of place, preserving views of the hills, maintaining the land outside the urban growth boundary, expanding open spaces, ensuring equitable access for all to enjoy, and advancing the urban forest management and native planting. Anything that you think might be added here?
One of the things about the urban edge is the wildlife corridor, as we just seen from the bear and mountain lions and coyotes and possums and all sorts of animals now are crisscrossing our city and our town. And I think we need to have the corridor, the wildlife corridor, not only preserved but enhanced in this as well, since we're on the edge of our boundaries here with the wildlife. And I think that those types of words and phrases to emphasize our ability to enhance the wildlife corridor for the total ecology and interactions with our natural environment.
John, can I ask you a question about that?
Yes.
There's an article in the Argus Courier about how this might become a more common thing. Like from a naturalist ecological perspective, can you help us understand why that is?
Okay, the way the climate is changing, and also the search for food and water is bringing many, because the cities will have sources of food and water that if animals are struggling out there, and then with our corridors and trying to crisscross or finding new pathways to get from here to there in their adventures, and in cases where you have a population increasing, let's say if the bears all of a sudden, yes, they propagated this year, whatever reason, that because the deer are suffering, so they had more food, and so they populated better. So if one population increases dramatically, they have a tendency to spread, and you need to have more wildlife corridors and movement that you will see happening. And just that number of peoples and interactions, because you have more people with vehicles moving around, there's going to be more interactions because we have more houses that are more moving out into nature. There's more of us that are moving, like a huge population has moved out into nature because they enjoy it so much. But because of that, there's going to be a lot more interaction happening with those places. Tahoe is an excellent example of that. We've moved into their environment. And as we grow and expand overall in our cities and the way we expand our housings outside our boundaries here. So that's some of the reasons why there's a lot more interactions. And also we're recording a lot more. Turns out cameras are out there watching their movements at night, and we're recording a lot more movement that have always been here, but we're seeing a lot more, and the data is being collected now. So yes, so a lot more reporting is going on. That's the other reason.
Great. Thank you, John. And thanks for the question, Jesse. Janice, yes.
I'm just looking at the workshop comments. And the one that says so important, especially for the west side. I would say that that's equal with is pointing out one side of town.
Sorry, you cut out there for a second, Jenny. So you were saying it should be equally weighted, not just the west side.
I mean, that could be a comment that could be east or west side of town.
Got it.
But he's having a microclimate and a lot of cement and asphalt.
Got it.
It's not just one or the other.
It could happen
And I hate
anywhere.
to see the division in this community.
Mhm.
And that is divisiveness.
Yeah, in the surface areas, in the maps I've looked at, looking at like tree canopies, which illustrate, and on those same maps are also the hardscapes in comparison to the greenscape. And in many of our disadvantaged communities, there's a huge amount more hardscape of observable from up above. And so, yeah, and especially the east side has a lot of that in some of those areas. So that's why east and west, I think Janice is correct. We need to include all the areas, and especially occurs in the lower income areas.
Got it. Got it. Great point. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and move us on here. And Phil, I see that you joined our group. I guess Ron maybe bored you and you came to a more exciting group.
I think Phil has been
having some problems.
Having some technical issues because I feel
Maybe.
like I've let him in
multiple times.
6 or 7 times. So
Multiple
we're glad
Phils.
you're with us, Phil.
Thanks for joining. Okay, so next one is restore the natural function of the Petaluma River and its tributaries while expanding complementary recreational entertainment and economic opportunities. Any thoughts on this one? Roberto or Sierra? Oh, yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I would just add that we need to work with both the county and government and nonprofits, all three of those, and on this, because it's not just within our city, but also in our watershed area. And we're going to need a lot more cooperation of all those, of county, state, federal agencies, because I'm working on the Watershed Coalition right now, and we're developing a plan for the watershed enhancement and river enhancement plan. And that needs to be inclusive in what we're trying to do and combined with, so that the RCD, the Resource Conservation District, is partnering at all levels of government, along with the nonprofits and with the landowners within the watershed, and a cooperative effort and a plan should be developed for maintaining, because the tributaries go all the way up into the hills here, and we're going to need a bigger master plan for the entire watershed, not just for the city. And the city should actually lead that for this watershed, and not leave it to the county to lead. And, like the Groundwater Sustainability Agency would be a wonderful place to start, because they're looking at entire watershed concept, and so is the RCD looking at the entire watershed. Sonoma Land Trust needs to be included, a Petaluma group, not because they tend to have a tendency of just being Santa Rosa and Sonoma County, and Petaluma tends to get ignored. So we need to have a Sonoma Land Trust needs to have a Petaluma subgroup, and wherever we can do it. But the city needs to lead this effort for the watershed, which is all encompassing.
Great, thank you for that, John. These few are directly in your wheelhouse, which is, it's great to get your feedback. Thank you. Any other thoughts from the group on this one before we move forward? Fairly straightforward otherwise. I just saw a huge influx of folks into the waiting room, which was interesting. I don't know if a meeting just let out or what that was about, but they came and left. Heather, did you notice that?
I did. I was looking at there's 13 in here.
Yeah, that was
But
interesting.
it was very odd.
It was.
But I guess I just, and the names.
Yeah, I think we might have some
Zoom
CPAC
bombing.
meeting. Maybe, yeah.
Do
Maybe.
I admit them all?
It's a dangerous endeavor, but we can give it a shot. And
But I don't want to not welcome somebody that is legitimately trying to participate in this
Completely.
meeting because somebody's got a questionable.
Totally. I just see the numbers like popping up and down. It goes to like 18, then down to 10, and up to 18. I don't know if Eric is still with us and could help screen.
Maybe do one at a time, just in case.
Yeah, it'll be tricky to screen them otherwise.
Yeah.
Did we lose Eric again? Looks like we might have lost Eric. Hopefully.
I'll
Thank you, Heather. Well, I'll help you screen once they come in. Okay, so next, transportation, obviously, and transportation opportunities was fairly high on the list as well. And this one is about prioritizing cycling, walking, transit, and other transportation alternatives over private vehicles. So again, kind of emphasizing alternate modes of transportation, fairly straightforward. But any thoughts here? There's a note from members of the public about expanding electric vehicle infrastructure and other public transportation options, circuit small bus. Interesting. Any thoughts on this one in particular, team?
I would go with private vehicles is a wrong term. I think maybe in your mind, when you say that, you're thinking automobiles, but I think private vehicle, I'm thinking a bicycle is a private vehicle. So you better put in large metallic road vehicles or automobiles, something, because private vehicles does not express what we're trying to avoid.
Just be more explicit.
So you'd be more explicit. So large, heavy vehicles, some other terminology needs to be included in that, not just private vehicles. But we want the concept of one person driving a large thing down the road is being minimized, as well as removing the large vehicle itself. So single drivership needs to be included with that, as well as the larger weight vehicles on our roads.
Great point. Thank you for that. Roberto, I know you mingle in transportation. Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't really see the first bullet and the general comments kind of really focused on and the supporting concepts, at least the expanded infrastructure for electric vehicle. Given that it seems that where a lot of the major automotive industries are starting to invest, that we should be prepared for, you know, a higher influx of that, for that capability.
Yeah, there was a plan that I just saw at a meeting for the senior buildings that are going to be going down there by the river, and I guess near the river park. And one of the things I noticed is that there was no garages and there was no place for them to, because this older crowd are going to be moving a lot toward electric vehicles, but also electric bikes, electric scooters, electric wheelchairs, a lot of electric mobility for the individuals at all levels from small to large. And there was nothing in the plan that would show where they would plug in, how they would plug their instrument, their device in for their individual transport, which is going to be pretty much all electrified within the next 10 years since we're moving in that direction. So it's not just electric cars, it's electric scooters, electric motorcycles, things like there's things that look like airplanes that are coming down the pipeline for us, drones, what the like. So this whole concept of not just a infrastructure for cars, but it needs to be electrical infrastructure, charging stations for all transport vehicles, including bicycles and scooters and tricycles and motorcycles, wheelchairs, even segways. That's going to be a huge population of that increasing, I'm predicting, over the next 20 years.
That's a good point, John. Thank you.
Just,
yes, Roberto, yeah.
I was just gonna say, maybe it's not related to bullet 5 in terms of updating transportation. It's more of like a energy conscious kind of thing we need to consider is if we're really moving towards that big difference, there's got to be some restrictions on the grid usage. I mean, not a lot of homes I think might be fitted, you know, to be running all their appliances plus, you know, charging a car. So understanding how the grid works and when you're pulling all that power to, you know, your personal home or even a public space needs to be, you know, considered when doing these designs, right? So, and I'm sure the people who are making these are aware of that, but just wanted to voice that.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point.
Have everybody plugging in at once and saturating the grid, and we're gonna run into a bunch of problems, especially with these recent power outages. So,
yeah, great point.
Yeah,
So
since Roberto brought up the power grid and everything,
John,
PG&E is making movements toward maybe restricting some of the solar panels and charging a lot of things.
Yeah.
So in here, there needs to be a cooperative effort with PG&E to develop our electrical grid here locally in town, which will include a battery base, I think near the golf course, and also in other places, so that we become an example of how PG&E can work with a community to grow our smaller grid and various ways of providing that energy to our town. And I think we could be a leader if we work with PG&E instead of fighting them like a lot of other towns are doing.
Yeah, appreciate that, John. So Stephanie and or Jesse, who's got their hand up in your group?
Oh, I just wanted to reiterate the need to think about where electric vehicle charging infrastructure is placed, and just kind of reiterating what John said, but finding an equity toolkit that would be helpful for Petaluma. So there's just a lot of talk right now about where we're placing EV charging infrastructure and where we're not, and making sure that we think strategically about, achieving equity in the placement of those as well. Obviously, there's grid considerations like Roberto's saying, but also equity considerations. And there's great toolkits out there now, so finding something like that.
Great point, Jesse. Thank you for that. And Sierra agrees with that point as well. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of these, and I'm really glad you made that point. A lot of these principles are really cross-cutting in that way. So it's great to think about them kind of holistically when we're thinking about how they're phrased. So great point. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and move us to the next one. We have quite a few actually left here just to make sure we have enough time. So the next is about enhancing downtown as a center of Petaluma civic life for preserving its historic character, expanding pedestrian access and safety, providing public gathering spaces, and allowing for a diverse mix of uses. Obviously, your downtown is a gem, and this was meant to identify how best to preserve that character and further enhance it. Any thoughts on this one? There's a mention here about cyclists potentially being a part of that connectivity, pedestrians. Let's see if there's anything else. So some of the concepts were to reinforce downtown's identity, preserve historic buildings, improve pedestrian access, building upon the riverfront. Stephanie or Jesse, do you still have your hand up, or is that a new hand?
I haven't seen anything about the old rail line along the river. I know that's like it precedes my history in Petaluma, but it's been like a contentious, expensive endeavor to rethink that elevated abandoned rail. But it's starting to get a little sight for sore eyes. There was also some talk of some of the pylons maybe falling over during the last storm with all of that water rushing into the river. So I know that's really specific, but just calling out, it's such a huge piece of access to the river that I don't know where we can address that, but re-envisioning the waterfront, I don't know, that's where Stephanie's expertise comes in. I don't know. But I think there's something there we need to really think strategically about for the next couple decades for Petaluma downtown.
Yeah, and I liked what you said earlier about pedestrian and bicyclists. So include the word pedestrian and bicycle access and safety would be included on that. And also to beautify the river areas, the river banks need to be beautified. And maybe also we need to consider becoming more European in our style of restaurants, outdoor restaurants, and outdoor businesses along our river, especially there in the downtown area. There's an opportunity to make a transition now. And this trestle area I think is wonderful. It could be a flood wall as well as a place for tourists and gathering places, as well as dining and eating and drinking. So that whole trestle area, instead of tracks, could be turned into a combination of flood control as well as beautification along the banks all around that turning basin. And I've trying to talk folks into helping out with that beautification of the banks around there, And there might be ways of doing that with plantings and the like. But we need to think about the flood control area of the downtown area. It needs to be expanded, as well as all of this tourism and expansion of more people gathering along that riverfront.
Excellent. Thank you. Janice, I see your hand raised.
Just as businesses, as an example, if the Golden Eagle Shopping Center is ever torn down and redone, then it needs to face the river. Because too often we've gone the opposite direction. So we just need to keep going in the same direction of having the river's important and you don't want to hide from it.
Great. Thank you for that. And Stephanie, we might need to pick your brain about that because I know that's in your wheelhouse.
I keep telling her to say something. No, but I want to say one more thing. Janice, I agree with you. Like, I'm thinking about the Santa arriving on the riverboat in a couple weekends for my kids, and like, it's such a draw. But you go down there, and it's so crowded, and there's nowhere to stand, and there's no like tiered public spaces to get a view. And I'm just confused about the history of the uses on the river, and I don't know enough about the history, I guess, but I would love to see. I think it can achieve a lot of the other goals we just discussed about, like family friendly, age friendly. I know I'm using a really personal experience of like Santa arriving on the boat, but it's just, you're drawn to the water as a human with your kids. And then you get there and you're kind of like, wait, where do I go right now? So by creating public, really welcoming, surprising public spaces for us to gather as a community would be so exciting.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, and again, you're tapping directly into some of those kind of cross-cutting points of making this accessible for all and attractive for all age groups as well. That's a great note. Thank you for that, Jess. And I see a few hands raised again from the public. We thank you for your patience. This is a discussion currently with just the members of the GPAC, but we will have opportunity for public comment shortly after this, after we do the quick report out. So I'm moving us next to...
Wait, Dave, can I jump in here?
Oh, sure. Sorry, Roberto. Go ahead.
Just two quick things
Sure.
on this one. I would just be careful when we're addressing the issue of closing down streets, that is kind of counterintuitive to one of the supporting concepts of the congestion and traffic that we already have. And then secondary, it might be an overkill, but maybe we can take a page out of the big cities kind of rule book about coming up with a designated pickup and drop off spot for, Uber, Lyft, or taxis or whatever may be coming in. So they're not, during peak hours stopping, in the limited streets space that we have. So something.
Great points. Great points. Thank you for that, Roberto. Yeah, we do know that traffic is already a concern in some of these areas. So really smart to think about that proactively.
And instead of the word allow for diverse mix and uses, and that, how about promote instead of allow?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I like the idea of the Uber Lyft that was just presented. That's a really great idea of having designated pickup and drop off points, especially in the downtown area. That's a great idea.
Excellent. Thank you all for that. Next, we're going to move to this one that's on advance a forward-thinking economic development strategy that focuses on diversity, opportunity, and innovation. So this kind of feeds into, again, kind of some of the cross-cutting opportunities for pursuing green jobs and industries that help address climate emergencies. Is recognizing that economic development is super important to helping the city overall prosperity and fiscal health, supporting small businesses and local businesses. And I know we don't love the term, but BIPOC-owned businesses support the creative reuse of vacant and unutilized spaces and achieving job housing balance. So any thoughts on the way this one is phrased or anything else that we should consider? Heather, I still see a wild stream of folks coming and going. I'm not sure what's happening, but it sounds like it's working itself out.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening either, and we'll just need to be kind of ready to mute and bump people out when we go to
Sounds good.
public comment.
Sounds good. Yeah, everyone's muted as they come in, so I think we're good. Any thoughts on this one in particular? Surprising economic development, as you saw, wasn't super high on the list for members of the community at the workshops. Not that it wasn't important, but it wasn't ranked very high. Any thoughts from you all on this particular one, or anything that should be updated? Roberto?
I mean, I'm just pondering on how can we, it was the last one in the bar chart you showed. I'm just trying to figure out why. And then here we have some supporting concepts that kind of are leading towards modern economic development. And so I don't really have an answer yet, but I'm trying to figure out what maybe we could do better to understand why that was so low. So yeah, I'm still dwelling on it. So
yeah, no, it's a great question. It's a great question because obviously it's kind of the backbone for everything else that could happen is that fiscal health. So it is interesting why that would be ranked so low.
Yeah, and then I'm just thinking back to our past meetings where we all discussed, in and outflow of transportation and jobs, and I think this is kind of tied in. I think we probably owe ourselves to do a little better job on this one on how to support it, but I just really can't think of how right now.
Yeah, no, that's a good point though. I mean, there'll be plenty of opportunity to provide feedback if something great comes to mind. Jess or Stephanie?
Roberto had a really nice idea there about the transport.
Sorry, John. I think
go ahead.
Jess,
Someone else was there? Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. I think Jess or Stephanie had their hand raised.
Oh, I was just wondering, like in here, is there anything about supporting work from home, like as a long-term trend? Like as people, I work from home, Stephanie works from home, like we think about how to support the entrepreneurs and the small business owners who do live in Petaluma. Maybe that's why this isn't that high, because people are kind of self-sufficient. We don't have a lot of large employers in Petaluma. We have Amy's, Clover, Golden State. What's the water bottle company? I'm just trying to think of and then government, Camelback. But I wonder if we can carve out a piece of the general plan that really supports small businesses, entrepreneurs, small batch, small scale manufacturing, and creating spaces that we talked about this in previous GPAC meetings, but like 400 to 600 square foot spaces that really, where people might be selling stuff online and then they can suddenly have a physical brick and mortar presence in Petaluma somewhere. Maybe it's the future of the fairgrounds, to have spaces that are really for entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs of color, women entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, and I don't know, you have thoughts about that?
And I think there's also a connection to some of these larger employers. I think in some of the other cities that I work in, there's kind of a mentorship or a patronage of the, community type aspect, where I know there's a lot of resistance to, no one wants to be a company town or any of that, but I do think there's programs where, whether it's the waterfront or it's vacant, that some of these companies that are invested in this town can actually play a role in supporting the small business. And we've seen a lot of successful partnerships. And if you think about even like outside of DC, in the way that like a Nike, they're not, screaming from the rooftops, but they've done a ton of the playground. Like there's good examples around how corporate can actually assist with this from a purely financial standpoint. And I think that's something that hasn't really been explored here.
Yeah.
And should be.
Excellent points. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think those came up somewhat in the supporting concepts, but all those ideas are fantastic and something we should consider to help bolster this one particular guiding principle, and maybe that'll help folks kind of think a little bit bigger than what it's trying to say, and it might gain some additional support that way. Yes, Sierra, I saw your hand next, and then we'll go to John and then to Roberto. Sierra.
Thanks. I wanted to uplift in the community comments. I love that word resiliency. And so I was thinking maybe it would fit like advance a resilient forward-looking economic, development strategy, something like that. And then I was thinking about resiliency, and something that I would love to see reflected more in this guiding principle is how we as a Petaluma community can work to make circular models and circular systems rather than linear, which is kind of where the world is at right now. So just thinking about how can we be producing what we need as much as we can right here in Petaluma, and just closing that loop as far as products, as far as waste, as far as services. So anything we could do to kind of bolster that idea in this principle, I think that would really help guide future city council policy and decision-making for our town.
Excellent. Thank you, Sierra. We just got the 5-minute warning before we have to get to the next section. We have quite a few left, but I definitely want to give you all a chance to provide input here. John, I know you had something to contribute on this one as well.
Yeah, just to support, I think Sarah and Roberto both had great ideas there, and they sort of combine together because there's a critical problem we have, and this is the large number of people, 20,000 people coming to our town and 20,000 people leaving our town every day to go work, and having an economic, a holistic industry here where we provide employment for people living in our town, and then provide support for those folks coming in and out to help them locate here physically, to know if they work here, they should live here, and also to provide opportunities for folks that are living here but going elsewhere, providing those businesses that can support them. But we need to change that, and this is a metric we need to look at and say, let's do the metric. Let's get the 20,000 people leaving and coming, and let's get that down to 10,000 in the next 10 years, if we can, and use that as a metric measure of how successful we are really in our transport and how we developed our town and our economy to make that shift in this transport issue, which is huge for our greenhouse gases.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Roberto, back to you. Yeah. Did you think about how to make this better?
Yeah, a little bit. John kind of sparked like a light bulb here. If we could maybe determine how many people could utilize the smart train but choose not to. And what I mean by that is where they work along the train line, and maybe we can work with companies to incentivize for employees to use the smart train in one way or another. I'm not sure if that's already done, but we could probably encourage more of the train use that we have. So wanted to share that. And then I was just thinking back to when I first applied to GPAC. I was reading one of the papers that I think you guys posted. I'm gonna have to go back and dig and see what the title of it was, but in a nutshell, I just remembered when I was reading the economic development section on it, it didn't really prioritize innovation. It was more retail and small business focus. So in my opinion, the mindset from whenever that was written, that's kind of what's being fed down, right? If that's what leadership is thinking, then how can we support, what we want to do here, which is more newer and futuristic development. So I'm gonna have to go back and remember which document that was, but it was in the executive summary. So if the priority is for more retail stuff, it's just kind of, it's counterintuitive to our goal, right? If we want to have more green jobs, more innovative jobs, but the city leadership wants to do something else, it's kind of hard to be forward thinking, right? I guess from a jobs perspective.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And Michelle, I don't know if that rings a bell for you about the actual document. I know there were some white papers and stuff that were prepared early on, but let us know, Roberto in particular, what you were thinking of, and we'll make sure to reincorporate that back in this mix. But those are all fantastic points.
I'll put it on my to-do list. I think it's on another computer.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Michelle, is there 15 total of these? Am I doing a terrible job of facilitating? We're only halfway through and we need to transition.
I think there's 14.
14
I
total.
keep trying to scroll, but there's so many comments.
Okay, I know it just kind of keeps going and going. So I want to try to get us, not that I want to shortchange this discussion at all. But I want to try to get us through these next few fairly efficiently. So if you have something kind of new or different to add to any of these, please let us know. And then I want to get us to the areas of discussion conversation before we transition back to the, sorry, I just saw Kanye West apparently just joined the meeting, so pretty sure that's not real. But so I want to make sure we get through these fairly efficiently, have the area discussion conversation, and then get to the report out. So this is kind of starting to hone in on the sustainability component that I know is very important to you all and to many members of the community. I'm not going to actually just read these aloud anymore, just let you all read through them and let me know if there's anything in particular that stands out on this one. This one tries to capture everything from climate change, sea level rise, and sustainability all in one. It's fairly meaty. Anything, and remember, we're really kind of asking almost like how we might fine tune these, maybe minor wordsmithing. So anything in particular stand out here that you think should be revised as we move through these fairly efficiently? And again, if you had a chance to think about these more deeply in your homework, please do send us more detail after the meeting. Again, I don't want it all kind of shortchange the conversation, but I also want to make sure we have enough time to get to the areas of discussion before we wrap up. So I don't see anyone raising their hand on this one, so we're going to keep moving. This gets back to a lot of what we just talked about, kind of the infrastructure that supports infill development and addresses impacts of climate change. This kind of, again, is somewhat cross-cutting to some of the sustainability issues we talked about earlier. As a few of you might have mentioned, co-planning infrastructure improvements with urban development patterns. You mentioned earlier, Roberto, about the electrical grid and making sure that that's up to speed and can keep up with the demand. Anything in particular here that you all see important? Yeah, Roberto.
Yeah, so the plan is supposed to address, right, like 20, 25 years into the future and for us to be ready. So when I read about housing developments in infill, I was reading a report the other day about how just in general, globally, like the population is declining. And my question is, are we more planning for the current issue today, or are we seeing where the trends are going, I guess, in the future? So will we in the future have actually more vacant buildings than we predicted? Our family size is, generally smaller now. So it's just something I was pondering the other day, and how it might affect, the infrastructure to support infill, right? So the idea that we have today might not be the right one for 20, 25 years from now.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah, I know. I mean, and that's exactly right. Like, this is like future, kind of future planning and future thinking, and not as we're talking about a general plan that's 45 years out potentially, or 35 years out. We need to make sure that we're planning sufficiently. So that's a great point. Any other thoughts on this one in particular?
I was just gonna say, there's a new report out this week. I can't remember who did it, but it was about the growth of jobs in the Bay Area over the last year or two. And I just wonder, I know you guys have been collecting all this data, and it's probably in one of the reports I haven't read, so I'll have to admit that, but number of jobs in Petaluma over the last like 5 to 10 years, new jobs, and then to your point, Roberto, like the projected growth of jobs, and then how are we going to match housing to jobs? Trying to, obviously no one has a crystal ball, and the pandemic, if anything, has taught us not to predict anything anymore, but there are certain patterns of growth. And I would just want to make sure that our job housing mix is balanced, and maybe that's in here with climate change being a massive consideration of what kind of housing we should be building and where.
Great point. Great point. Excellent. Excellent. You all are hitting very directly on all kind of the challenge of these cross-cutting issues. That I mean, all of these principles kind of have to work in tandem, right, to make sure that this works the way that we're all hoping to. So those are all fantastic points. Thank you for that. I'm going to move us quickly to the next one. Physically and psychologically integrate and connect the east and west sides of town. We do know, as Janice, you mentioned earlier, this tends to be a point of contention, particularly, or has been in the past maybe. So we want to make sure that everything, that the city again is working cohesively as a whole, and we have clean integration between both sides of town. And we think about Petaluma as a whole versus split into two halves. So that's what this is trying to get at in particular. I don't know if there's any thoughts on this one. But pretty straightforward. I'm going to keep moving us along unless you all stop me. Next is to promote social and economic justice to address structural, social, and economic inequities and racism. So this gets back at one of the pillars that we spoke to earlier more directly. Any particular thoughts on that one? Pretty straightforward. Excellent. On we go. Next is be a leader within the region and beyond. Fairly straightforward. But again, this kind of speaks to all the great things happening in the city, but being recognized as a leader regionally. Fairly straightforward as well. Not sure if you all have any thoughts on that. I'm going to keep us rolling. Promote more affordable housing and diversity of housing options. You all have started to tap into that as well, really creating an equitable environment, and that's what the housing element itself as part of this process will hope to address, and making sure that there's housing opportunities for all different members of your community. Also pretty straightforward. Lastly, I hope, unless there's one more in here, Michelle, but prioritize infill development in appropriate locations throughout the city, which is a perfect segue to the areas of discussion conversation. So yes, Heather, did you have a thought on this one?
Well, before we move to that, I wanted to bring up one other thing, but not related to this one specifically.
Sure, there's a great time. Go ahead.
Okay, so we have received a number of comments, and this also came up, and I don't know if it's in this spreadsheet or not, asking for another pillar around creativity and innovation. So I think you saw a couple comments, and we had is that not in here, Dave? If you scroll down, a suggestion, there it was.
Yeah,
Creativity and innovation, as well as something around food security. So I don't know if those, resonate with the group, whether they're separate pillars, they're, integrated in. You think, well, that would be a perfect complement to pillar number 7 or something like that. But I just wanted to kind of bring those up as things that have kind of risen in feedback we've been getting.
Yeah, I'll comment. I saw those emails. I would agree with the creativity and innovation. And for food security, I wonder if we could add that as a supporting maybe topic, like the other 14 we've done.
Yeah, I think we should, and we can take a look at that when we're kind of wordsmithing to bring the final back to you guys, if there's a place for food security to kind of be incorporated into one of the other ones.
Yeah, great point. Any other thoughts on this one, on these couple? Yes, Sierra.
Sorry if I'm getting this confused, but I would also like to agree with adding creativity and innovation, but not as a pillar. I see it more as one of the guiding principles. So I don't know if that was already said, so apologies, but yeah, that's where I would put it.
No, great point. Yeah, it is one that kind of again, might be kind of cross-cutting amongst a few different principles itself, but great point to have it really highlighted as a guiding principle. Could definitely look into that. Okay, I am now going to try my best to move us along here to talk about the areas of discussion. So as Ron mentioned, you all have seen kind of iterations of this map. This latest iteration, correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, but it includes basically the input that we received from the community in this somewhat kind of heat map that identifies areas for transformation all the way down to no change for the areas of discussion, as well as the urban growth expansion consideration, and that's to consider or not consider at all. So as you can see here, generally there isn't any area that I can see that was straight up called for transformation, but there are many that in orange in particular that are calling for some type of redevelopment. And as Ron kind of quickly went through the median and mean averages of the input they received, the only one that seems to have fallen off was area F, and I'll bring the map back up as well here quickly, but just to kind of give you all a sense of the input received from folks and what they thought were kind of ripe for some type of development. And I know you don't know these areas by heart, but we'll go back and see the map. But in general, it looked like most areas, people wanted to see what some type of change to potentially kind of generally maintaining as we kind of reach the fringes. So I'm going to scroll through these quickly and bring the map back up so we can try to get your feedback here. Yes.
I just wanted to, when you said fell off, I think what, just for clarification, the one area, and it's that dark red between the river and 101, falling off actually means an area identified for maintain it as it is, no change.
Great point. Sorry about that. Right. It wasn't not a no change. That's
and
right.
then can I just clarify with the UGB expansion areas? I want to clarify just so we're all kind of, on the same page. These expansion areas were actually identified in the voter initiative, the UGB voter initiative. So they're not new things that they're not new areas coming up through this process. It's kind of going back to areas that had previously been identified as potential expansions to check in and to, get feedback. Are these still, do we even want to be considering these anymore in 2021? Or are these no longer appropriate? So I've heard some different takes on, that this process is creating those areas. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that.
Thank you, Heather. Appreciate that. Yeah, so we're hoping that you had a chance to review this latest map. And really we're asking mainly if there's any areas that you see that are identified that maybe shouldn't be in general, if maybe there shouldn't be considered at all for any type of change or highlighted in any way. So John, we'll start with you.
Okay, the two areas, F and P. So the area is talking about F not to be maintained as is. I think that's a wrong terminology of what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is we don't want to change into development, housing, and the like in a big road. That is a true statement, but we want it to be developed into a park, into a flood control area with basins and things. We want to see a transformation and an improvement into the ecological area into a natural based solution, and not transition into housing and road and the like. So I think it needs to be changed, but the direction of change needs to be completely opposite of what was planned earlier. And so that's why I think the wrong term is unchanged. I think we need to change it to a open space, and that's the change I think that was being actually asked for, and not unchanged. I think people use the wrong terms or spoke incorrectly or how it's being analyzed. So that should not be unchanged. It should be changed into open area or changed into an ecological flood area that is more management for our city park. That's one thing. Then In the P area, I'm a little color. My wife and I don't agree on colors, but this brown that's there by the P, I don't know what that brown means. It looks brown, and whereas I don't see brown in any of your colors. Where that is on the chart, if that means one maintained, is that the same color? What? Not sure.
I think that might be some development, but there's a lens over this, and maybe Michelle, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, but that's over by the golf course.
Yeah, I think it
would
just
suggest there needs to be a
happened to have,
change
like,
there that's been recommended, that we want to see a change from the current unused golf situation into something a little bit more useful to our city.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for that, John. And yeah, I misspoke when I said F was a no change zone. It was actually just a maintain, not necessarily a no change, but we hear you loud and clear that when we're talking about transformation, we're not talking about development there, but more of a preservation of open space or enhancement of open space and ecological resources. That's a great point.
Yeah, enhancement, please.
Sounds great.
Not
Thank you.
maintenance, enhancement.
Sounds good. Thank you. Any other thought from members of the GPAC on the areas of discussion that have been identified?
One of the other areas of that didn't even show up on this map is Midtown. It's like it's left blank in there as undesignated entirely. And I think the Midtown there area that is now white amongst all the other colors. And why that get left off? Because I think there's a lot of desire, it seems like, to help that area, because it's it's one of those areas that needs help, has been designated, and it was actually found out to be lower trees and removal of the trees by the freeway, and it's been designated as an area of need, and yet we don't want to change it. I think that white needs to be modified.
And I guess this is a good clarification. I'm not sure if these colors mean absolutely nothing happens in terms of tree planting and active transportation networks, but more areas to really focus on or not focus on in terms of development potential. Is that correct?
I would say yes to that. Yeah, Michelle, unless
Yeah.
you have something different. So this is primarily talking about new development. Where new development can be focused. Then obviously there's a lot of conversation around housing and other opportunities, but it doesn't necessarily preclude other areas from getting enhanced in other ways. So that's a great point, Heather. Okay, I think we've now reached or gone way over our small group exercise portion. So again, I want to provide you all plenty of opportunity to chime in. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, allow you all to take a deep breath. And Eric, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and close the small groups and bring everyone back. And then we will do a quick report out. Actually, we might even bypass the report out just to make sure we can get, because there's a lot of other great information that we might want to share with you. So yeah, Janice, did you have a thought?
Well, this was on the lands that, agriculture, I think, is changing. It's not as big as it was. And so you're going to be having smaller ag areas. And so are some of these areas good for ag? I mean, I go to the farmer's market all the time. Where's everything produced? It can be produced right here. And so you can almost have like a real ag area within a lot of these areas that flood. And so I'd like to look at some of these lands. I look at, as an example, number 3 over the purple one, which I don't think should be developed down by the wastewater plant, but it's across the street from the wastewater plant. And so you would have the ability to get tertiary water directly to that site. And so
I think that's a great point, Janice. And I think some of it might also be rethinking how we define those areas, because we have one sense of what agriculture means, and we have received comments about that, kind of the cottage farming or home-based farming, and whether it's defining areas specifically for ag, or it's adopting regulations that provide more flexibility for that to be kind of an accessory use in some areas as well. So I think that's a great comment.
A lot of people are just talking about, go ahead. I'll deal with it later.
No, no, I'm sorry to cut you off, Jay. That's a fantastic point, and that note was definitely taken.
That's fine. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So everyone, welcome back. I hope you had a great conversation. I apparently didn't do a great job facilitating my group because we spent way too much time diving in, but we were having such a good conversation that I didn't want to cut it short. So team and Ron, I was thinking maybe we pivot and just jump right into the next segment of the presentation, because I know there's a lot of great information still that you want to share. And we could report back out through this summary what we've heard from the group collectively and not do a report out right now. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I would just say that we had a fantastic conversation in group 2, a lot of very thoughtful comments on the pillars, the guiding principles, and a lot of great constructive feedback on the map as well. So just thanks to everybody who's in group 2.
Heather, are you okay with that if we move forward?
I'm okay with that. I think it would be helpful if we kind of let the GPAC know what we're doing next with this. So is it correct that what's going to be happening is we're going to go back and with all those comments that we received and the feedback from those groups, we're going to be looking at those and then coming back with kind of a final version of those at the next GPAC meeting for the GPAC to look at and thumbs up, thumbs down, or yes, but add a comma here and everything in between. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, it is. So yeah,
okay.
Digesting all the public input with the additional guidance from the GPAC. Hopefully you'll see a complete draft of all these work products that are the outcomes of the visioning phase. And we'll have that for you at the next meeting. Looking for a recommendation from you before it goes to council.
Great. Thank you all again. That was definitely a fantastic discussion and really good to get your direction as we continue to get community input on how to help move that forward. So with that, I'm going to start sharing screen here again and hand it back over to Ron to give us a little bit of next steps and your role moving forward. Ron, did we lose you? Is it not letting you unmute?
Sorry, I just lost my screen for a second.
No problem.
Yeah, so in this final portion of the meeting, we want to really introduce 3 quick concepts and ideas related to ways in which the GPAC can help us moving forward. So first, I'm going to share some thoughts about vision statements and invite you as homework in between meetings to prepare, draft, and share vision statements for us to use as a starting point for developing a vision statement. And then I'm going to introduce a concept which I think we've talked about previously, but are getting near the point of wanting to actually implement some topic-specific working groups for the GPAC to organize and use to take a deeper dive on some topics. And then Heather is going to facilitate a short conversation soliciting some of your feedback in your role as General Plan Update ambassadors before we go back to public comment and close out the meeting. So first, vision statement. So the bottom line here is we want to leave you with a homework assignment. As we've mentioned before, one of the work products from this phase and based on all the community input is a vision statement to go along with the pillars of Petaluma and the guiding principles. Next slide, please. We can share these if helpful, but there are many, many different ways in which communities will craft a vision statement for their general plan. On the top here is a 1 or 2 sentence version, which is one end of the spectrum. And on the right-hand side is a 5-6 paragraph version that nearly fills the page in 8-point font. In between are other iterations. There's the short mini paragraph, there's the 2-paragraph option, there's the 3-paragraph option. There's many, many different ways to do this, but the idea is to clearly articulate the key characteristics of what the people of Petaluma would like the Petaluma of 2045 to be. And again, next slide, please. This is kind of the last step in this long process of gleaning vision-related input from the public, starting back in 2020, including the listening sessions with you, and more recently, the input at the pop-ups related to people's comments on what they'd like to see in the future of Petaluma, and then at the workshop, asking people to write headlines describing Petaluma in 2045. So next slide, please, Dave. And so in that packet we sent you is also a section focused specifically on summarizing that public input related specifically to vision. So it summarizes people's responses at the pop-up to what you love about Petaluma and what you'd like to see 10 to 20 years out. And then it also summarizes people's response to the imagine someone's writing an article about Petaluma in 2045, what is the title and subtitle? So next slide, please. So what we would ask that you would do is either individually or if you'd like, form small groups amongst yourselves and draft proposed vision statements describing the desired characteristics of Petaluma in 2045. Again, can be whichever form you prefer, the lengthy version or the short and sweet version. And we're asking that you send those to the project email address by December 5th, which is 2 weeks from this Sunday, I believe. So that's a homework assignment we'd like to leave with you. I want to pause there and see if there's any questions about that task.
Can we make sure to just emphasizing, and I think you guys probably know this, that small groups so that we don't have a quorum when you guys are meeting on this.
Great point, Heather. Yes, John.
Okay, one of the things that I'm doing on a regular basis now is using a Google Doc, a shared, and then multiple folks are able to edit it. And we're even doing that in a couple other agencies and government places. So this is where Brown Act may come into play, but I think if you have this as an assignment and have the document up there and have people's ability to go ahead and make comments on it, maybe not to edit it, but allow folks to make comments here and there, ideas, and then we can see other people's ideas and contribute and add to each other, because you can actually have layered comments, one on top of another, so of support for an idea. And that way you get a lot of people to interact quickly on a single document instead of having this diversity of inputs and then not to do with, okay, how do you prioritize all these inputs? It would be a little bit more organized in our input process.
Yeah, two quick thoughts there, Joan. I think it's an excellent idea if people want to form small groups to work on a statement together. That these cloud-based documents are a great way to do that. Part of the reason we're not approaching that as a group is to avoid Brown Act violations. And so, again, we prefer that you work on this with groups of people that are less than quorum to avoid any potential Brown Act. But that's great. If you want to work with some people on a document collaboratively, Google Docs or OneDrive with Microsoft Word or equivalent would be a great way to do that. Chris, you got a question or comment?
Well, just are you going to send that? I like those examples. Are you going to send that? Can you send that to me? I'm really curious to. I'll work off that. And as far as working in groups, what I work in communications, and what usually works best is that people individually draft something and then it gets thrown into the pot for comments and sort of tweaking so that it doesn't get all kind of mushed up in the very beginning, that there's something clear for people to comment on rather than a bunch of people trying to make something up. But I want to, if you could send me that, that'd be great.
Well, and that's why we are giving you the option of either working individually or in small groups. So what I would suggest, if you prefer that approach, which if it was me, I would do the same thing. I would write something up and then share it with a small handful of people on the GPAC that I think might have some useful feedback and take that route. What we're going to do is we're going to get the variety of vision statements that individuals or small groups send us, and then to make an effort at bringing together some options or a proposed vision statement for your consideration.
But I will add that, Chris, we will send an email out. We will gather those vision statements and send them out. So you're not trying to remember what was shown in tiny, tiny script on a screen, but those might be good starting points.
Great. Thanks for that, Chris. Bill, welcome.
I guess I just have to ask, with the pillars and the guiding principles, is a vision statement really necessary? Is it going to add something that we're not covering already? Or is it just restating something that we've already covered?
Ideally, a vision statement describes the characteristics of the Petaluma that you prefer to see in 2045. The principles, in turn, are designed to describe the pathways, we provide directional guidance to achieve that vision. In a lot of processes, we typically focus on the vision first and then come back to guiding principles. But in the case of Petaluma, because the current general plan already included guiding principles, we thought it was a useful place to start the conversation. And it wasn't until just at this workshop where we got a comprehensive enough set of public input on vision statement that we're able to get into that conversation. So it's a little bit of a out of order, but to your question, I think both are valuable and serve different purposes. They're complementary, but they serve different purposes.
Okay.
Thanks for that, Bill. Let's see, if there aren't any other questions on the vision statements, we'll definitely follow up with you, as Heather mentioned, with those examples. But I wanted to move us forward to the next piece. So back over to you, Ron.
Okay, and this piece is really kind of a preview and an opportunity to get some initial feedback from the GPAC. So I think we mentioned early on, and we even did a working group early on focused on helping us develop the engagement plan, but we're now getting to a point in the planning process where it's helpful to think about GPAC members forming topic-specific working groups. Slide, please. So to give you a sense of what this is all about, the purpose really is for these small groups to take a deeper dive into critical topics for the general plan. And I'll share some examples and some proposed ideas for topics here in just a second. And give you an opportunity to really get your hands dirty and get into the work of crafting a general plan. And it would also be a great opportunity to capitalize on the wealth of knowledge and experience that all of you bring to this endeavor. It's also a neat way to make good use of your time and expertise in between meetings. And the outputs would be ideas or concepts that could be or should be considered when we get into the stage with policy frameworks, when we get down to the goal setting and identification of specific programs or policies, and some of the metrics we might use to measure success of general planning. So logistics, what we're thinking of is groups of potentially 5 to 7 working groups, each composed of no more than 7 people. They would be self-directed and self-facilitated. And GPAC members could participate in more than one, but would not be required or obligated to participate. And that this time frame for this would be, first half of 2022. And at the bottom of this slide is outlined what would likely be maybe a kind of a proposed approach, a 4 meeting series approach to convening, working through some ideas, and coming up with some recommendations. The next slide, give you a sense of what we're talking about specifically. Here's just an initial set of ideas that have arisen already. None should be a surprise, but these are the sorts of topics that we think it might be useful for working groups to take that deeper dive into. Again, nothing surprising: climate, equity, the areas outside the urban edge, but also the remaining open space within the city boundaries, mobility, character, quality of life, and housing, and there's probably others. And then finally, so just share that information because we have a few initial questions for you as we further refine this concept and prepare to bring back and launch the idea at subsequent meetings. But time permitting, would really like some initial thoughts on whether or not you think this general approach is helpful and makes sense. Another key question for us is whether we should limit this to general GPAC member participation, or if it would be helpful to invite other members of the public to join some of the working groups. And then finally, if you have any thoughts on what topics specifically the working groups would best focus on, we'd appreciate that at this point as well. We'll come back to you then at another meeting with proposed topics and getting the working groups organized. So any questions about the process or the approach, thoughts on whether they should be limited to GPAC members or not, and whether and ideas of other topics that we might consider.
Any thoughts here, group? I know it's getting late into the evening. There'll be plenty of opportunity to provide feedback on this via email after the meeting as well. But this is our effort to circle back. Yes, Dave. Welcome.
Gets me quickly. Didn't expect that. No, in terms of non-GPAC members, I like that idea a fair bit. In fact, when I look at 6 groups and a maximum of 7 people, that's 42 people groups. We only have 14 of our members here this evening. That would be all of us serving on 3 groups, which is not desirable and beyond your limit anyway. We need to have non-GPAC members join in. But I would say that keep capping it at a maximum of 7 is still appropriate. If we go above that, committees become unworkable. So hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Dave. That is, we'll definitely note that down. Yes, Janice.
I was kind of thinking in the same lines as Dave. I think there are some important people to have, a lot of people to have a part of these groups, just as long as it's not too many, the groups in themselves.
Sounds good. Thank you. Jesse or Stephanie?
I just want to add, I like that idea because I'm like professionally and personally sad to see Panama step off because he moved out of city boundaries. And I know I emailed with you guys about it, and I think other people feel similarly. He's so much expertise that we should tap into. So this would allow some people who like been on GPAC, or people who wanted to be in GPAC but lived out of city boundaries. Like I know several of the people who asked if they could even apply and then didn't, because so it might be an interesting way to balance the urban rural as well, which is something I think we probably can't do because of GPAC rules. So just, yeah, it's great idea.
Great point. Great point. Thank you for that. Okay. I don't see any other raised hands, so we are going to go ahead and move forward here now. And I think, Heather, I'm turning this over to you.
Yeah, and I'm going to be very brief on this just to kind of initiate this discussion, because I want to make sure we have time to get to public comment at the end of the meeting and get everybody out on time. But so we are just, we just did a pretty our first kind of big engagement push in this process. And so kind of lifting ourselves up, thinking about what worked, what didn't work. And one of the things that I really wanted to touch base with the GPAC about is you are one of the most vital resources in this process as community ambassadors, to be that conduit to make sure that everyone's being pulled in to when you're at work or at a school event or whatever it is, kind of continuing to spread the word and gather feedback. So as one of our resources, I've noticed different GPAC members have found different ways to participate. Some people showed up for the pop-up events and had those dialogues. Some people have done more kind of small group. I know several people joined David in talking about youth engagement, and other people have talked about the Latinx engagement. So people are finding different ways to participate, but staff just felt like it would be a good time to pause and solicit input from the GPAC in terms of, do you feel like you're being, that's weird that my hand is raised when I didn't raise my hand. I feel like something is.
That's someone that might have
That's someone who's saying they're me that isn't me.
Rename themselves. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I'm right here. So I wanted to solicit some kind of feedback. Do you have the resources you need? Do you feel like you've got the support to fill that role as an ambassador? Are there things that we could be doing to support you differently or better? Like a business card with the website on it. I mean, that's a super low tech thing to do, but just I don't have a specific what the answer is I'm looking for. It's more just like putting it out there, opening the floor to say, tell us how we can support you. How can we give you resources to be doing what we are asking you to do? Because it's a big job and it's an important job. And then the other piece of that is, are we talking to all the people we should be talking to? I was in a meeting where somebody brought up the East Side Alliance, and I had never heard of the East Side Alliance, and so I was like, who's on the East Side Alliance and how do we get in touch with them? So that's another way we really want to make sure that we're periodically checking in with all of you to say, are there other people we should be talking to? And if so, please let us know. So we can have a brief discussion tonight, but I know this is kind of also just, I'm throwing it out there. The other thing, we were going to prepare like a little survey to get some feedback from all of you and send that out. So I'm open to whatever way that works for all of you, but really wanted to authentically and clearly touch base and get your feedback on how we can help you be community ambassadors.
Thank you, Heather. Josh, I did see your hand raised. You're welcome to contribute here real quick if you'd like to.
And just a very tactical recommendation that I'll spare everybody. Not all 27 people need to hear have their time taken up with it. So I'll happily just email that.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you, Josh. Yeah, all and any input would be fantastic from you all. We very much appreciate all your time and effort, and we want to make sure this is super valuable for you all as well. So one last slide here before we move on to public comment. Ron, did you want to take this and talk through next steps?
Sure, really briefly. As Heather noted earlier, upcoming in December is a overview for the City Council of the existing conditions findings. We are thinking the next GPAC meeting would be January 20th. We're concerned that we won't have time to turn around the vision guiding principles draft for you by a meeting in late December. Plus, we thought we've all been working very hard, and everybody might appreciate a break over the holidays. Not that work would be stopping or slowing down. There still would be much going on. The part of our team, as you know, is also working on the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, and there's two very substantive meetings scheduled with the Climate Action Committee in December and January to focus on deep dive specifically on greenhouse gas emission measures and adaptation strategies. We're also in the process of scheduling educational forums for early 2022 focused on some of the more salient issues that emerge from the existing conditions work. And then also ongoing is the work that we need to do building on your input tonight, as well as all the rest of the community input, the vision guiding principles in the diagram. And as you know, also the housing inventory is in process and is critical work that we need to be completing in the near term to inform a lot of next steps. And then we'll also be organizing working groups so that we can come back at your next meeting and have that ready to go for you. That's what's upcoming prior to your next meeting.
Great, thank you, Ron. So lastly, we are about to open it up for public comment. Unfortunately, I believe we got a Zoom bombed a bit here tonight. So I want to just reiterate for those members of the public that are going to give the opportunity to speak. If we do receive any inappropriate comments, we will mute you right away and remove you from the meeting. So we hope that those that did stick around with us will remain respectful and just appreciate everyone's time, particularly members of the public, for sticking with us through the meeting. And now we're going to give you the opportunity to contribute. So Eric, I will turn it over to you to go down the list.
Thanks, Dave. I'm seeing just 2 hands raised now, starting with Sonoma County Conservation Council, followed by Barry Busowitz. And for Sonoma County Conservation Council, I'll ask that you state your name prior, but I have asked you to unmute yourself.
Hi, yes, this is Susan Kirks. I actually didn't realize I was on this platform. I've been in 4 Zoom meetings today, and I imagine many can relate to that. One was going on at the same time your meeting was, so my personal Zoom was in that. And Sonoma County Conservation Council is a council of several conservation organizations, and 2 that I represent, Madrone Audubon and Paula Lane Action Network, are members. So we use their platform occasionally. I was in one of the small groups, and since I see we only have 2 minutes and I wish that we had 3, to be honest, I kind of forgot some of the comments I really had hoped to share in the small group setting, but I submitted some information about natural environment, biological resources, and special status species. I had hoped that Heather would post that in public comment for the meeting here, and I see that that didn't occur, but I do hear that individual members received the information that was given to the Climate Action Commission this week. So I'd briefly just like to ask everyone if you could take a look at that. I hope that accuracy and wholeness in those areas is important to the GPAC, and there was some really incomplete and inaccurate information. And just as an example, for wildlife corridors, the Sonoma Valley Wildlife Corridor does not have relevance for Petaluma. We have our own really important wildlife corridors and crossings. And geographically, Petaluma is significant for wildlife corridors. So that's a project that I completed, and it's mentioned and explained in the material sent to you. And just to clarify, we are connected to a regional mapping project called Critical Linkages. So I see I'm out of time now. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Susan. And up next is Barry Busowitz. Barry, I've asked you to unmute.
Thank you, Eric, and thanks everybody. Here's something that energizes me about what I've been viewing tonight, and it goes to the call to being ambassadors, a call which I share with you all. And it was started with the bar graph of the values, and the first one was to be carbon neutral, and the next several were sort of related to that. And then the economic development came down at the bottom. And along with Roberto Rosila, who asked this question in our small group, I said, well, what explains this? And I have a hypothesis for you. I believe that the top values that we stated are real drivers of medium-term and long-term economic economic development and sustainability and resilience. They may not be directly short-term drivers of it, which is the way we often think of economic development. And so for those who share this vision that resonated with me from the top values, we need to put this together and explain this well to those who haven't perhaps had the time or the capacity to see how important Petaluma's long-term values are for our economic sustainability. So that the call for us is to put this into good language and to communicate it effectively. And your work here is really helping me to think that through. I appreciate this greatly, And I encourage you to keep up the work that will help me be an ambassador who can speak meaningfully to other people in our community. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Barry. And up next is Bev at Protect Wild Petaluma. Bev, I've asked you to unmute.
Hi, thanks for listening. First of all, I also wanted to comment on the economic development thing. I think that it was at the low end of the spectrum because it has been overemphasized for years. And the environment is what's been shortchanged, and people understand that. So I just wanted to comment on that. In terms of electric, I think rooftop solar and battery backups need to be supported so we don't have to rely on propane or gas generators when the power does go out. If we can dissociate our rooftop solar from PG&E, then we could just use the battery backup. Well, even if we were attached to PG&E, we could use that. And then it would be neat if we could citywide link the residential rooftop solar installations so that we would have our own local Petaluma grid, which I think was mentioned. So I agree with that. The last thing, though, that I wanted to say was we could have the best general plan imaginable. Our last general plan had a lot of really good stuff in it. And I really like what I'm seeing here. However, I am afraid that we will come up with this marvelous general plan, which will be ignored by our planning department, commission, city council, staff. And if it is ignored, what can we do? So we need to find a way to put some teeth in it to make sure that it is carried out. That's so important. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Bev. And up next is Veronica Olson. Veronica, I've asked you to unmute yourself.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I thank you, everybody, for your work. And I would just like, this is a question that I have for the areas of discussion, the 16 areas of discussion. When we were participating in the group quadrant meetings, one of the questions I thought about is these 16 areas and their definition and why they are designated as they are. Are we taking into account what these actually are? Because there were no cross streets or landmarks for the average person to determine what those designations are. I know that they probably are, existing, but are we making assumptions going forward with these designations? And I just wanted to put that out there and to see if we've been asked those questions without knowing what they actually represent, then maybe we need to ask the question again. The other thing that I had a comment on was there's creativity, innovation. I'd just like to add design in there because we have so many wicked problems in our lives right now, and we need to have design. We need to design everything. We need to design new systems. We need to design our buildings. We need to design our streets to accommodate these very big problems. So thanks so much for listening.
Thank you, Veronica, for your comment. And I'm not seeing any more hands raised for our members of the public tonight. Dave, back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. And thank you again, members of the public that stayed with us through this very long meeting. As we typically do, any final thoughts? I know you all have had great opportunity to share throughout the evening, and now we're about 5 minutes over. But we always like to provide you space with any final thoughts before we wrap up. And John, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, just coming up, I saw someone ask somewhere what the difference is between a sustainable concepts versus regenerative concepts and why we're using one word or the other word. And in agriculture, where sustainable agriculture and regenerative agriculture is where they started from a little while ago. And there's a very big difference between sustainable ag and regenerative ag and the way they're thought of and philosophical. Sustainable is like our wineries can be sustainable. They're still allowed to use pesticides with IPM, integrated pest management. And as long as they're economically sustainable and able to thrive economically and yet not disrupt the environment. So sustainable is a advanced way of continuing with maybe good best business practices, but regenerative is used for a very different philosophy, and that is to regenerate the land, regenerate the plants, regenerate the economy, make it better, improve on where we are now, not just sustainable, not just biodynamic, but regenerative. So it's really important, I think, that we use the term regenerative so that we want to repair and enhance and improve what we have, not just sustain it and make it sustainable. We want to do a lot more than just sustainability. So I think that's where we're at. And I really like the term that you used, and we need to emphasize what regenerative means philosophically throughout the report.
Thank you for that, John. Okay, everyone looks, oh, yeah, Roberto, welcome.
Yeah, just since I don't think we're gonna meet until January, over the last, almost 2 years here, we globally have been learning a lesson together of what it means to kind of go through a pandemic and all this rapid change from what we used to thought was normal. So as we kind of conclude and move, the visioning phase, and we're kind of gearing up towards the end, there's a couple of 3 categories that I think we need to kind of focus on as we're learning these lessons together. How have, for instance, our supply chains been affected? Our society as a whole has significantly been changed recently, and our economy has been affected globally. So taking kind of those 3 main things and seeing how they apply to Petaluma as we go forward to kind of concluding the visioning, I think is going to be very key and important for kind of the success of, our path forward here. Especially because a lot of the research and lessons learned they're kind of coming out as we go through this. So I'm kind of just thinking, staying on top with current events of how, these reports come out and how we can apply these is going to be, very important. So that's all I wanted to say.
Good points, Roberto. Thank you for that. Yes, Chris.
Yeah, just something that's occurring to me, and we have a long way to go in this process, and my thoughts are just coming together. But it seems like at some point, and when we talk about being ambassadors or reaching out to the public, that it would be really great to have stories like about people whose lives are going to be touched by the general plan, or a story about regenerative development, so that it's an educate. Maybe they would go in the Argus Courier, and maybe they would go in stuff that the city would put out. But there's got to be ways to have this whole process come back to human beings. And, it includes the environment, it includes animals, it includes it all. But I mean, it's like you live here, this is going to impact you. And these are some things that we're considering. And, I'm happy to talk with Heather, Ron at some point offline about possibilities. But I think there's like communication threads that we could pick up and weave with this that we all could use, communication tools. So just putting that out there.
Great. I love that, Chris. It's a great idea to really ground this in Petalumans and the people and who it's going to impact. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, all. Well, we've reached the end of the meeting, and we won't see you all until after the new year, it sounds like. So have a fantastic Thanksgiving, a great New Year. Thank you so much for all your efforts this year. It's been great to see you all. And I'll hand it over to you, Heather, for some final thoughts.
This was a packed meeting, but I feel like so much great dialogue happened. I will be following up with something to kind of solicit GPAC members' input on how we can support you. So stay tuned for that. And there's, I kind of have a short list of things that we'll follow up with. So the vision statements and other things. So thank you all for your time and your service, and have a wonderful holiday.
Good night, all.
Have good holidays.